Hello everyone, today a video on a very little known factor in dry fasting. Very few people will talk to you about it. The antinatriuretic factor, which is a key mechanism that occurs exclusively during dry fasting, which we will explore further. Before that, I'm going to talk once more about my two books, which are still available through Marco Piete Editions. Still available. For those wanting practical dry fasting tips, you have two books. Start with the first one. In this first book, we could say there were still some carbohydrates present, whereas in the second one, there are none left. That is essentially the difference. But both books complement each other well. These are essential books. They contain the updates made based on the Russian research regarding what already existed, especially in the second. And you can absolutely do this at home. You have a book that provides you some info. There is not everything in the second book. There are not all the details of the fasting, but you have plenty of info. And if you are a therapist or know your body well, you can start dry fasting. I would say 3 to 4 days at home. It's playable, but that's not what we recommend. The most interesting is to be in a group with family or with friends, things like that. If you practice fasting in a community, it's much nicer, much more interesting because you can share. And then if you can afford it, if you have the means, if you have the time, it's especially the time that people lack to come once to see how it happens. And when you have seen 20 people fasting with different stories, you learn confidence, and then you see how the process happens. And after, it's much easier to start yourself. So I was also told in the news that the YouTube algorithm unsubscribes people, so don't hesitate to resubscribe for those who are not subscribed to the channel. So I think the videos, you still see them appear if a video comes out, but sometimes the subscriptions are removed automatically. I don't know why. Anyway, well, so look. Don't hesitate to put comments. There are no worries. I don't always answer everything. Sometimes I miss things, etc. But you can without others. Note things there. So this subject is fundamental to the understanding of dry fasting. Why we last so long? Because many don't believe it, calling us liars, saying it's impossible. After 3 days, we are dead. So I still heard a video a few days ago from a well-known doctor on YouTube, a functional doctor, who said that after 3 days without drinking or eating, we were dead. So for people who are so specialized in medicine, who know wells of science, really, they really know a lot of things. But how can one ignore that human beings are capable of living for a certain number of days without drinking? But how can one not know that? So, when people are too, it is tunnel vision. You are too focused on one area, you forget the rest. So when you are in natural medicine, alternative therapies, get interested in everything that is happening. You must go check, search, and understand. Read the studies there. So that was for the little story. I had a good laugh. I said, well, he is not aware. It is still curious. What? There you go. So these messages have been conveyed for years and years by all these doctors, and people are not going to look a little bit at the literature. It's clear there is not much, but you can still find this info, and it must circulate anyway. So today, this antinatriuretic factor is explained by the fact that, well, there you go. When we talk about dry fasting, most people know the antidiuretic hormone. So they know that this hormone allows for water retention to reduce the volume of urine, but there is a second mechanism which is also important, which is also the conservation of sodium. There you go. So in the mechanisms of dry fasting, there is this factor that comes into play physiologically. So we see clearly with this phenomenon that the body will naturally right away save water. It will retain sodium naturally without us doing anything. So if nature, our human body, our internal physiology has equipped us with this, there must be a reason. So we really have this knowledge, and then we are able to hold a dry fast quite honestly. If well conducted for a few days without danger, if nature equipped us with this, it is not for nothing, maybe to save us, but also perhaps to heal us, because in dry fasting, there you go. In fasting and dry fasting, many traditions, I made videos on that. Could we have here the fountain of youth, which nobody understood? It is exactly what I think, because we really have a method that allows for an antioxidant effect in a general way. When you are just an obesity, you have abdominal fat, you are in chronic inflammation, you create oxidative stress just because you have cramps in you. Dry fasting provides a powerful anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effect that serves as a preventive measure. Generally speaking, that is it. So to understand the physiology of this anti-natriuretic effect, water always follows sodium. In other words, when the body loses sodium, it naturally loses water as well. What is the dry fasting challenge? During a water fast, the body receives no food but continues to receive water. During a dry fast, it receives neither food nor water. So the body must immediately implement mechanisms for endogenous water production, repairs, but also survival, aiming to preserve every available drop of water. So from the very first hours, the kidneys detect a slight drop in volume of circulating fluid and an increase in body fluid concentration. And then the situation will immediately trigger the secretion of ADH, which we can also call vasopressin. There you go. So it activates this famous renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system mechanism, and then ADH is produced by the hypothalamus, and then it is released at the level of the pituitary gland, and then its role is to order the kidneys to recover more water before it is lost in urine. Urine becomes rarer and more concentrated, so as you progress in the dry fast, you see your urine becomes very concentrated and dark, so you concentrate waste and toxins. And then at times you have some release. I will not go into details, that is explained. If people are in the cures, I go into more detail, but basically you have this urine that gets loaded with waste and toxins. Then you have ADH, the antidiuretic hormone, which acts directly on water conservation. We are equipped with these systems, so we have no worries about doing a dry fast for several days. We have this physiology that comes into play, this factor of water conservation through this ADH factor. So this action alone is not enough. You also need the antinatriuretic factor, so you must also retain sodium. That really means anti-loss. Antinatriuretic, that really means anti-loss of sodium. So it is the main hormone responsible for this function. It is called aldosterone, and then when the kidneys detect a drop in blood volume, they immediately release this enzyme called renin, and this renin triggers a biological cascade leading to the formation of angiotensin II. So angiotensin II then stimulates. You have a secretion of aldosterone at the kidney level, the adrenal glands which secrete this aldosterone. And then aldosterone acts on the kidneys by giving them a precise order to retain the salt. Do not lose the sodium. There you go. Why retain the sodium? Because sodium is the main electrolyte of the extracellular fluid. It acts like an osmotic sponge, and then when sodium stays in the body, water stays too, so the two go hand in hand. When sodium is eliminated, water always follows. That is how, by conserving the sodium, the body will directly conserve its water. It is an extremely well-honed strategy, coded in our genetics. In fact, we could say the antidiuretic hormone directly protects water, and then aldosterone indirectly protects the water by protecting the sodium. We do not want to lose sodium. We must not get confused. When I make this video, it is not, oh, I might have lost salt. And then as soon as I finish my dry fast, I must stuff myself with salt. If you do that, it is a catastrophe. Do not do that. Because you will put salt back in large quantities into your body, and it will create, boom, a kind of flush. And then you are going to create edema, so you must wait before consuming salt. Do not get trapped. It is a mistake we see in people who know nothing, who start long dry fasts. Without knowing these details, there you go. It is one thing. There are plenty of contradictions that you must know. That is why I tell people, even if you have read my books, do not start long dry fasts, because you do not master everything. These are things we observe in the cures, in short. So we have these two mechanisms during the dry fast. These two systems work simultaneously together. You have the hormone antidiuretic called ADH, which reduces water losses. Then you have aldosterone, which reduces sodium losses. And together, what do they allow? To maintain stable blood pressure. We have markers. We know exactly when people go up or down too much, etc. So this double protective mechanism allows for maintaining a stable pressure, to have a blood volume that is correct, to protect the kidneys, to slow down dehydration. It is the key. We have put in place systems to avoid dehydration. We do not do just anything. There are prerequisites. I am not going to detail all these things, which are mainly in the master class where I explain all these details. Without these mechanisms, a dry fast would be physiologically impossible. It is an adaptation of our organism inherited in our genes, in our coding. So these mechanisms did not come out of a hat. As I explained, it is the result of millions of years of evolution. Our ancestors frequently faced times without immediate access to water or food, so that is the situation. The human body evolved highly sophisticated systems to handle these crisis situations, such as famine, Water is gone, but it also requires training for those who come to the retreats, who are trained to fast, and they are perfectly comfortable. If anything happens to them, they are stuck at the airport, they cannot get out, they are, I do not know, kidnapped in a country by crazy people, I do not know what. They go for a walk, they have an accident, they fall into a ditch. We often see things like that in the newspapers. So if people know about dry fasting, they say, oh, I have been seen, we follow. We know we can last 10 days without food or water. I am not surprised when I hear in the news that a man survived after 3 days. He vanished into the wild, he did not die. He returned, I say, well, yes, okay, he can go for a while, we can go for 3 weeks. I think I could go for 3 weeks without a problem. Well, maybe not, there you go, I have never tested it, but we could go for a while without drinking, without being dead afterwards. So, if you already have that knowledge, You have protection, you are trained, you know that you can last a certain number of days in an accident, you have developed knowledge of your body. So it is always interesting to be interested in practicing fasting because you develop these cases, you resurrect these unknown mechanisms that we have. You train yourself. We see the people who arrive in the retreats. There are people who come every year for health prevention. And the first dry fast was hard for them. Then it goes smoothly. It is easy, but you have to keep a rhythm. That is how it is. So dry fasting activates these ancestral biological programs today. The organism gradually passes from a mode of abundance to a mode of economy, of regeneration, of restructuring, of cleaning. And every molecule in this double protective mechanism of water and salt, every sodium ion becomes precious. And then, so we have a mode that enters into economy of regeneration, of economy of water and salt, which is natural. And then as fat reserves are mobilized, what we call beta oxidation, which will produce metabolic water, energy, and then carbon dioxide. So this mechanism, key that we have in dry fasting. And we have water that is renewed. So this famous metabolic water created by the metabolism, which becomes an internal resource. So we are never really dehydrated because we create water with the degradation of fat, of fatty substances. And then our anti-diuretic mechanism, which will aim to avoid water losses. And then anti-natriuretic, where we will avoid losing salt, allows then to really conserve our metabolic water to the maximum. And then the body is not content with producing water. It is also designed to avoid losing salt and water. I repeat myself, but this way the video is clear. There. In summary, dry fasting triggers two complementary hormonal responses. ADH conserves water, aldosterone conserves sodium. And as water follows sodium, the conservation of sodium becomes a major strategy of water preservation. That is why we can hold dry fasts for a long time. I say it depends on the person because we are all variable, but in any case, in a very secure way, between 3 and 10 days, it is quite easy. The 10 days a little less because 10 days is long, but on a dry fast of 5 days, we are quite safe if it is well prepared. Easy there. So it is one of the fundamental pillars of the organism to adapt to the absence of water. So it was to understand these mechanisms that help us better understand the intelligence we have in us, this biological intelligence of the human body, and its remarkable capacity for adaptation in the face of a temporary deprivation of water. There you go. So that was all for today for this video on the anti-natriuretic factor and then the anti-diuretic factor, which are key mechanisms that everyone must know to understand dry fasting. Because I am perhaps the only one to talk about it, even our Russian friends, I am not sure they know that. I do not know. But it is really important to know this physiology to be safe. When you start fasting, you have no fear. You know that the physiology, you know it, you know that you are not going to die, you are not going to lack water. You have two protective mechanisms. You have beta oxidation, which makes you water, and these factors which retain your water and salt. So there you go. Be quiet. And that is all for today. See you soon. Bye-bye.